These are very difficult times. I know that you've been in these kinds of situations. Either had to deal with them on a political side or had to deal with them on the military side. I'm wondering, when you heard some of these things unfolding, before we get into some of the decisions made or not made, what was going through your mind?
The thing that goes through my mind whenever something happens is the first word you hear is going to be wrong. And you let some time pass just to make sure you get the right facts. I mean, there's always this fog of war whenever a crisis, whether it's domestic or whether it's over there in a foreign country or whether it's an actual war, to try to find out what's occurring. And then sit back and make sure that you're speaking about the values of America. I mean, here we had this film that was denigrating a religion in the world. And yet we knew eventually that it was causing, or people were taking advantage of us, another extremism. The film's extreme, but so were those that began to breach our consulate and our embassy. And what you want to do is make sure, yes, Americans were secure. Number two, that we don't say anything but it's wrong. And third, make sure you don't let this extremism in a film drive and be successful in what it's trying to do, is set our Western American values in opposition to another religion in another country. We can work together, and that's what our values are. So I thought the president in the next day set the exact right tone.
The opposite of that would be then what candidate Romney did. When you watched his press conference the next day, after he had some time to think about it, after his initial statement was released, what were your thoughts then?
I saw a man who was backfilling. It was someone who had made a rash decision in the middle of the night without waiting for the facts to come in, and then directed the shot he wanted to take. Basically, he was punching below his weight. He aimed it at a public servant there on the streets of Cairo, and took a shot. Not only did he pull the trigger too quickly, but he misdirected his shot. So to my mind, that is not what Mitt Romney wanted to portray at such a moment as this, where he wanted to show that, yes, he could be a commander-in-chief who was resolute, but also thoughtful. And then he just lost a complete day as you watched him trying to backfill in the next 24 hours.
If you were advising him, it seems like he did not actually consult his foreign policy advisors, got it from his communications people and some others. But if you had been talking to him, what would you say to someone who is trying to speak and show a certain capability when it comes to dealing with foreign affairs, but still trying to be respectful of the situation as it's unfolding?
Of any part of policy that you should not first take a political view on, it's foreign policy, Mr. Romney. Go with your gut on this one, not with a political aim on it. And that's what he did. He listened to political types give him advice about taking a quick shot on the other side and using a foreign incident as a political football. At moments when something's happening to Americans abroad, that is when you most want Mr. Romney to step back and put yourself in their shoes. And remember the values that they're doing, serving us out there, and speak well about that. Second, I would so advise him that at moments like this, where you know that what was being used by others on the other extreme was an outrageous film that has nothing to do with American values, that he should also wisely condemn that. I think he missed grabbing a hold of those types of values in this incident.
We see now that the incident is starting to spread throughout other regions, other nations in the region. In Morocco, we hear about things in Yemen, Tunisia, all have had some kind of form of protest, flag burning, and that kind of thing. As this kind of starts to spread a bit, what kind of tack do you take if you're in the president's seat, talking about, obviously there are things here that you can't control, but there are things that you can control. and knowing how layered everything is and how volatile it is, how do you approach the next couple of days?
Yes, consistent in sense of purpose, making sure you understand, as you well said, that each country has different layers within it, that you have to treat each with a certain set of principles that may be consistent throughout those countries where the Arab Spring happened, but also you understand each country is a little different. Let's take Libya first. In this case, it's a country that doesn't have control of all its land. There are scores of militants there who kept their arms. And so right away the president there apologized. You heard the news reports today where people in marketplaces were begging TV studios, TV cameras there to tell Americans they're sorry. That nation and its people were also outraged by this. This was a outlaw militant group that did this, and we have to work with that president with the understanding of that. But then when you go to Egypt, where last week they were able, because they have a wonderful military and interior police force, to protect the Syrian embassy when there were protests, why didn't the president of Egypt condemn right away what happened, and why hadn't his force given us the protection there? In this case, President Obama needs to look him in the eye and say, your actions were inadequate. And I think that is the different layers you have in each. There's an understanding that that president is trying to be a bit less aligned with America. He went to Iran recently, even though we asked him not to, for the movement of the non-aligned nations. But at the same time, he has to understand that broaching our United States compound and embassy is, and not immediately apologize, is inadequate. So that's the type of approach he has to take, and that's what the president has done. He has spoken that we will be persistent in our policies out there of bringing these nations more into the world of democracy so we have better peace and prosperity. But at the same time, he has said it again today that he will pursue those who have to be pursued until we get them. I think he's got the right approach in those two areas.
Now, one of the things that the president said was that he was asked a direct question about our relationship with the nation of Egypt, and he described them as not an ally but not an enemy. I guess as a president, those words are carefully chosen, saying that, knowing that that interview is going to be broadcast around the world eventually. I'm curious about what you think goes into choosing that phrasing, and then how do you think that's received by people across North Africa and the Middle East?
Well, that was an interesting choice of words. And again, you must have it right. I thought Mrs. Clinton had said that, but it must have been the president. I frankly was a little surprised at the choice of words. It was almost agnostic. But yet, when you keep in mind that Egypt has, against our request, had the president go over there, their president, over there to Iran, to where he is trying to effect a resolution of Syria with Iran and other nations, Turkey and others, you kind of see that there's a bit of independence here that by itself might not be bad, but would not have been acceptable as an ally of the United States. And you kind of bind that a little bit with, he didn't condemn that embassy breach right away. That I think the president is sending a signal. Look, we're in a deal here right now with you about trying to forgive $1 billion of your loan. And by the way, you need $5 billion from the International Monetary Fund. And oh, by the way, we give you $1.3 billion every year for your military. We'd like to be allied. And there's a lot of economic power we can bring with you. We have 100 businessmen visiting Egypt the day that this incident occurred. I think he was sending a message that we value you. But you know what? There's certain international norms that you did not abide by in this incident. I think he was speaking to the President Morsi over there in this incident. It's a pretty delicate choice of words he took, and I respect that about this president. He's really willing to say it like it is. As he said against Pakistan, you won't go get bin Laden. We will violate your airspace with drones till we get them.
Speaking of which, as this situation continues to unfold, is there a place that it goes to that their forces the hand of the United States to be more active as far as beyond diplomacy? Is there a point in which you're considering the use of some kind of military forces, whether it's just for protection or to be a proactive unit to go after people? How does that process work?
I think there's two steps here. First off, you will see an increase, as you are seeing in Libya, of our security forces as we're landing 40 Marines there and 2 United States naval ships are off the coast. In fact, Al, I would tell you that when you look at the types of security that were present in this consulate, it was really just a guarded gate, nothing more. I think we were a bit remiss in not having better security there. So
who does that responsibility fall on?
That is the State Department.
Okay.
They have a very good security assessment team, and I think that the proof will be that because our ambassador had gone there in the middle of the revolution, before we had an ambassador there, and then he knew the area, and Benghazi had been the centerpiece where he had stopped 100,000 people from being massacred, that we felt pretty safe there, maybe even more safe than as compared to Tripoli, which was Gaddafi's homeland, closer to his home base. So I think we should have been more careful. But the second point is this: I have no doubt that we will insert whatever we have to of our special forces to hunt down the perpetrators who went after and took down 4 of our great Americans, 4 public servants, 4 government employees, by the way, Al, which I sometimes get a little tired of people not appreciating those who work in government. They're great Americans. I worked in the military with them all the time. State Department personnel, my gosh, there they are every day, not known as some terrorist in whichever country is going to do an attack against them. They walk the field in Afghanistan. There's a lot of heroes in our government. I don't care if it's State Department, military, whether it's NASA, Education Department, and I think it's about time we begin recognizing the service they do for us.
Yeah, that's kind of been part of the Republican narrative, that as soon as the president took office, all of a sudden everyone who works in government is now bad.
Rather than remembering, John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And so many men and women wanted and came to government to help serve. Look, it's not accountable all the time. We know that, all right? But rather than condemning them, fix the accountability. And that's kind of what my argument is.
What is there kind of a tipping point here as far as the region goes? Because this kind of thing could be one of those things that is just a week of a news cycle and then kind of peters out and then that's it. It could also turn into something much larger. How does that get navigated?
That is a tough one. And I think that's why the president said what he did. And you brought it out well about Egypt. He's sending a message. Egypt can control this. Their president, with his security forces and others, can control it. The choice is his. In Libya, they will control it. That president knows what they owe us as a nation in Libya. The question becomes Syria, really. Syria has now been taken off the front pages. Syria is going to take advantage of this. And so I think the real tipping point is not going to be in Egypt. This may go on for a while. It's not going to be in Libya. It's not even going to be in Yemen. I think it's going to be what happens in Syria, because Iran is allied with Syria. And if Syria is able to survive what's going on, you once more have a country whose not people, but its leadership is about mischief and will continue to foment incidents like this. And so whither goes Syria, I think, is really the determinant. We have weathered these types of incidents before, when we had the burning of the Quran in Afghanistan, mistakenly by our soldiers who, quite frankly, didn't mean it purposely, from what I understand when I read the investigation. They were corrected, but it wasn't as malicious as they try to portray it. And the picture of our soldiers with the urination, if you remember that, we will weather these with all. There's some bigger fish to fry here, and we have to keep in mind it is the militants who are in Libya. It is not the Muslim Brotherhood. It is the party, the Salafist, who are pretty upset in Egypt and aren't part of the government, are more extreme, are not happy with the success that the Brotherhood is having as almost more of a stable leader that are trying to do mischief in this. So I think that making sure we convince that president in both countries to clamp down on these militants as we work the Syria issue so it doesn't become a vacuum where Iran still continues to operate its power through, I think is the real tipping point.
Is Syria going to come to a point in which it's going to have to involve outside military intervention?
I think you will eventually see that the approach that's been taken, that we are supplying intelligence, we are supplying communications gear, and that communications gear is being given purposely by us so we can listen in, frankly. We don't know who's who in the zoo right there. We have to figure it out. And so as intelligence gets better, as arms are being given to them by the nations like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Cooperative Council states, you will probably see that eventually we will work with Turkey or someone for a safe haven on their side of the border. I think we are right to let not to immerse us as the leader into this group, but having those surrounding it who know who the players are to be the ones pushing this one. I think to those who say just go in, don't understand that's a much more sophisticated air defense system in Syria, who shot down a Turkish warplane recently. It's not Iraq's broken down system, nor is it Libya's nearly non-existent system. It's a tougher nut to crack, quite frankly.
It's so complicated over there.
It is.
I think, again, as I'm listening to you explain some of these different aspects of it, it kind of underscores again how misguided Romney's comments are and were.
You have to have an understanding almost that within these dynamics of the region, there's inner dynamics like Shia and Sunni. I mean, that's what's playing out there in Syria. And then right here with this film, if some of the reports are right, they're Coptic Christians who had funded it from Egypt. And then you had on 9/11, you had a response by a militant group that the Libyan government doesn't have any control over, although it was like to, that was so well prepared, it leads you to believe that they were planning for this to occur. And then I think we have to step back and think, did any of these governments, and did we do a good enough job that when the leader of al-Qaeda actually had called for Libya to rise up because the number 2 al-Qaeda leader was killed by us in a drone attack just a week earlier, then you sit back and say, look, this is not about coming out and playing about political football. It is about a hard, aggressive, day-to-day involvement in the region, understanding of it like our ambassador gave us, who was willing and courageous enough to go on a ship in the middle of a revolution there, get to Benghazi, and earn the respect, and then gain the understanding of the people there. I mean, look, WikiLeaks happened, as you well know, about a year or two ago, and it was outrageous that these secrets were given out. But when they released those cables of the State Department, and you went through them, you had nothing but appreciation for the guts of our State Department employees, the intelligence they provide us, and the way they are negotiating out there. And, hey, negotiations and diplomacy, it's not like sitting down having a cup of tea. They're trying to make the other side hurt without having to go to war. And they're really good, and they're great warriors. And that's why having a statement that just simply comes out at 11 o'clock at night without any thought behind it, I think was a misdeed to those who serve us well.
Do you think, if you can project yourself, I'd hate to do this to you, but in your mind, see a Romney presidency, in your mind, what does that look like, foreign policy? Because one of my things that has bothered me throughout this whole campaign cycle is that obviously Mitt Romney wants to be known as someone who's going to be able to fix the economy. And that's all well and good that he feels that that's his expertise. But I think what this week is highlighting is the fact that you need a president that can handle not just the economy, but other things as well. And you could have an expert on the economy, but what is he going to do in the face of this? And so in your mind, when you look at a Romney presidency and seeing somehow what we're faced with currently around the world, and knowing that there are other things that are unforeseen that pop up all the time, what do you see his capabilities being?
Well, it concerns me because of what you said early in the interview. You had said, rightly, that Mr. Romney reportedly listened to his advisors. And unanimously, they all had said, put this statement out. It's not Mr. Romney himself that concerns me. It's who he's tied in with, who his advisors are. People, and the promises he's made in view of their advice, like, we're not, almost like we've got to go to war right now with Iran.
Right.
He hasn't said those words, but he says the president's got it all wrong. Well, what's the only other alternative than how the president is approaching them with hard economic sanctions? And the president has taken the military option off the table, but he's put it in the back of the table, not the front of the table. My take on Mr. Romney, as he calls Russia our number one geostrategic threat, my gosh, their military is broken. When I was in the Persian Gulf a few years ago, they had a ship there that got underway one day because of maintenance, and they couldn't afford the fuel. And except for their nuclear weapons, which Mr. Obama has wisely already had a 20% decrease with the START treaty and wants to do another one in his next 4 years, rather than saying they're our number one enemy. What? With China? As the president has said, no, we're taking a strategic shift to the Western Pacific, because that's where our economic, our financial, our diplomatic, and our security interests are for the 21st century. But also, we have Pakistan and Iran that he's dealing with wisely. Now, I'm a little concerned that, Mr. Romney and his team is going to look, as he said with Russia, through a Cold War prism and not understand the dynamics, the complexity of this war out there. You said it so well. This Arab Spring really brought it all to light if you hadn't seen it before. I also will say this. I think we increasingly have to look at the war no longer as a foreign policy of the United States or a domestic policy of the United States. We are such a globalized world today, and what happens, as you saw, over there affects us right here at home, that we have to look at it as one holistic national security policy where our domestic economic interests are impacted by our foreign diplomatic and foreign policy interests. And that person who's able to intertwine the two of them, I think, is the one that really, really need to take us in the future. And I think when you see how well the president has handled his foreign policy hat, as well as, it's not been perfect, let's admit it. But boy, to hand the keys back over to those who got us into this economic mess here, having that duality of an approach and intertwining the two best, I think it's better suited for this president for take us into the next 4 years.
Absolutely. It's 30 minutes past the hour of 9 p.m. here at 900 AM WURD, speaking with Joe Sestak. What's going on with you these days?
Well, I'm teaching out at Cheney University. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
Yep, I'm a couple weeks into a course there. Cheney was in my district, and I know Lincoln claims it, but since Cheney was in my district, the oldest historical black university in America, the African-American community, quite frankly,
I don't know if that's a diplomatic fight you want to take on.
Well, they're in my deck, but they were my best supporter. They were just wonderful to me, and I love the youth. And I went out there 17 times to visit when I was a congressman. So I'm teaching a course in ethical leadership.
Oh, great!
And because I would like to serve sometime, somehow, some way. Again, I got to decide how I'm best to do that. But in the interim, I want to be with the youth of America, and I want to be at places that, like Cheney, that debate ideas, because, quite frankly, as we just talked about, it's a tough, complex world out there. And, successful generals win. Then they go to war. If I get back into a campaign again or whatever, I want to make sure that I've already won through my mind the right approach to making sure we can restore the American dream.
That's interesting, too, because I think one of the things that's so frustrating on this end is seeing what seems to be a climate which is devoid of ethical leadership I mean, it seems like there's so many people that are just willing to basically say or do whatever is necessary for them to maintain their position or to gain the position.
I mean, you're right. I mean, and what struck me was, Al, when I went against my party's desires and ran for the United States Senate, I saw my own party, frankly, and some of the things that I wasn't content with. And so it's not about party versus party for me. It's about the values of America. And then the Democratic Party is best if it captures those. So, for example, I truly believe that we do value rugged individualism, but we also recognize that our character is best when it's aligned with the value of coming together for the commonwealth, to where together we build the roads and have the education. So we have those rugged, brave individuals who are courageous enough to climb those ladders we build together on their own. And all we ask of them is to build a couple more rungs so their children can climb even higher for their good, but also for America. But how to do that in a way that's of a moral leadership? Look, nobody's perfect. I'm not trying to go through that with the youth I'm there with. I'm trying to say that how can you really understand the wants, the needs, the expectations of those you might want to serve and lead? How do you rise and motivate them for for behavior that can change for the better good, and understand that at times there will be conflict of ideas? You see it in this election, but you can present the other side a choice that's based on values, not just you're in it for your own transaction to gain something yourself. And I think that's what you saw great leaders do, whether it was here in America, from Franklin Delano Roosevelt to Martin Luther King, or whether it was Gandhi overseas. And we all do it in our own area, whether it's as a president of a university, a fire chief with his firefighters. But that type of meaningful transformational leadership, I think, is what people really want today. Someone they can trust, and they know that we've got to restore where we were headed, and we stubbed our toe here in the last decade. How do we get it going again with someone we can trust?